started. So thanks again to those that are here. This is what we call a lived experience workshop. We did our first one last month on which we called living on the other side of a global pandemic, and how COVID has disproportionately affected people from low-income communities, minorities, really people of color, and not because of the disease itself, but because of the system. So with everything that has gone on in the last couple of weeks, with the Black Lives Matter movement and police brutality, we thought that we would do a workshop on that, but speaking to some amazing individuals that have had that experience, and the unfortunate experience of having to deal with that, and what that trauma means to each of them and to their families and communities, but also what we can do to move forward, and what actionable steps as individuals or organizations or companies can actually take to create systemic change. Because our mission is, we want to empower the next generation of creative industry leaders to break cycles of systemic inequalities that they've experienced. And the way that we see it is, if you look at like a lot of organizations talking about the things they're going to do, and they're going to donate to this fund and they're going to do that, which is amazing and needs to be done. But how do you take action? How do you actually stop these things without having people that have had that lived experience? So today we will speak to Yahniie and Stacy, about that, and they are activists. They are amazing. They're intelligent and creative, and they're going to be the change makers. So I'm kind of going to get out of the way in this one, but I'll guide the conversation. So just a little bit about Creative Futures before I introduce Yahniie and Stacy. What essentially we do, like I mentioned, is we're unearthing the next generation of creative industry leaders from underserved, disadvantaged backgrounds. And we work with companies to help them with their diversity and inclusion initiatives. But essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to help people from these communities get cool jobs and get cool careers into companies that haven't traditionally had pathways. We want to change that, and we want to change, which really is kind of discriminatory hiring policies, because we believe that that's true investment. That's true investment into communities, giving people career, giving people hope, giving people economic power to be able to create an equitable future. So that's what we do. We start our 12-week program tomorrow, but I'm going to kind of get into this. Yahniie, how are you going?
Hi, I'm doing well. Just trying to practice a lot more self-care right now. Sorry, Stacy, how are you doing?
I'm good. I was a little excited about this, to be talking about this with you and Jai. I don't know if you want me to introduce myself now. I wasn't sure if I should.
Give us a little bit about your story. Tell us a little bit about you and your story, where you came from, etc.
Oh, my name is Stacy Rojas. I go by Rojas actually, but Jai, you can call me Stacy. I'm a foreign person. Grew up in the hood. I'm from Compton. I grew up in a Black and brown community, and police violence is something I've been around my whole life. That it's something I grew up with, and it's still happening today. I don't know if you want me to keep going, or we're gonna discuss.
Yeah, we'll kind of unpack a little bit, and we'll discuss a little bit more. But I mean, Yahniie, over to you for a second as well. Do you want to kind of introduce yourself? I should mention that Yahnie's actually our colleague as well. Stacy and Yahniie, or Rojas and Yahniie, are both Creative Futures alumni, and Yahnie's now a co-founder in Creative Futures and our director of partnerships. So Yahniie, you want to tell a little bit about?
Yeah, so I am also from Compton. Shout out to Hub City, really quick. And I was system impacted, or am system impacted. I came through the foster care system, mental health, and juvenile justice all before 16 years old, in which I was traumatized and had to find ways to shift my trauma to advocacy, in which I've been doing for the last pretty much since my daughter was 6 months old. She's 9 now, about to be 10 next month. And so we yeah, I've been working with several organizations, and those organizations led me here to Creative Futures, and I am one of the third of the founding members.
Amazing. So, I mean, Yahniie, I'm going to let you lead this. What's going on right now? What's happening?
Oh. So right now, I feel like a lot of my friends and peers are calling it the reckoning. A lot of folks are waking up to what Black and brown people have been experiencing for a very, very long time. And I took myself, like I've been taking time myself to just educate myself on some of the histories and how things here, because I felt it a lot growing up, and I saw it, like my father being incarcerated. I saw like all of my uncles had been incarcerated. I saw DCFS. My mother was a foster youth as well, so I came into the system. She was a teen parent. Like all of the cycles kept repeating themselves, and so that's why I came into advocacy, because I wanted to see things change. And so, you know, a few years ago, I was taking a class, and we had this really dope teacher, and she told me, she was actually a Vietnamese teacher, and she was teaching English 101, and her method of teaching English 101 was, she didn't use the traditional book. She created her own book that was a compilation of all the different cultural oppressions in American history as our way to learn English 101, which is unheard of, right? So the first time that I heard about like policing associated with slavery was back then, right? And so that was a few years ago. I never really dug into it. She talked about broken windows policing. And so, yes, I went a little bit further into it. So you hear about people saying, Black people, and right now during the marches, you'll hear a lot about us still being in chains, right? And so we know about the mass incarceration system. We talk about that a lot. But what we don't know as a society, I think, is that policing was started, like LAPD, let's speak to LA because we're in Los Angeles, but I started to look across the nation as well. But in 1850, there was a federal law passed, the Fugitive Slave Act, right? That was also when the LA Sheriff's Department was developed in 1850, right? To capture slaves, right? To capture slaves and return them back to enslavement, okay? And so then we had in California in 1852, we had our state legislation that was passed. And then in 1853, the Los Angeles Rangers, which is now the LAPD, was formed. And so we can just see from the time and the correlation there that the specific reasoning for policing to initiate was to capture and return slaves. And that has not, we've had several uprisings. It seems that we have uprisings every 30 years around police brutality. So this is nothing new, right? We want to talk about the disproportionality of Black and brown people in the system as opposed to their population, especially Black people representing, let's say, 9.8% of the population, but representing over a quarter of LA systems, convictions, homelessness, everything. We're just leading in everything and most impacted by these things. And so a lot of time in these situations, let's say we're talking about police brutality and murder and misconduct, right? You have officers doing these things and they can go to court. They're doing these illegal things and they can go to court and ask for qualified immunity, which is one thing I personally feel like we need to tackle if we want to address accountability. And I think I want Stacy to talk and we can just go kind of back and forth. They have some things to speak about and that they want to acknowledge.
Oh, Yahniie, are you asking me about MeToo Behind Bars? Because I didn't know if I was supposed to follow up, but because remember, I'm not trying to take I kind of want to connect it to police violence, like out here, because like people think that it only happens out here, you know? Like out here, I've experienced so much police violence and have seen it like all my life. Like I said earlier, like my whole family has experienced it. I've seen my uncle get shot in front of me. My cousin has committed suicide because he was also queer, and he was threatened by cops that they would take him to prison, and he would be raped repeatedly for being queer. So he was young, you know, he got scared, he killed himself. So he hadn't even committed a crime. I'm sorry, y'all. But I also did 15 years. And with everyone talking about police violence, I also want people to know about the police violence that goes on in prisons. Except inside, it's like, it's harder for people to see. It's harder for people to believe us because they look at us as felons. Like, people don't believe us. So it's like, you're in this place away from society where people can't see what's going on. And they do what they want. It happens every day, all day. I mean, and if you bring it up, like if you try to tell someone or be a whistleblower on the inside, I mean, the retaliation is brutal. Like, they threaten you with more time, they take away your visits, they rip up your photos, they can stop your mail, they can take away your phone privileges. Like, being a whistleblower is like, you got to be ready for that. The retaliation, I mean, that's how we live. Like, that's how we survive in there. That's how we do our times, communicating with our families. There's so many. I was in a women's institution. I mean, women that have kids, like, that's how you communicate. Like, they take away everything. And that's why we have so many people committing suicide or attempting to commit suicide, because of what these officers do inside of prison. So I also just wanted to mention that, just like what goes on in the women's prison, and how, like, I was a whistleblower, and kind of what happened to me, and the way I was stripped out by these male officers and put in a little room with them, and I was bent over at the waist, butt naked, as they threatened me with rape, and they told me they would show me what a real man was, because somehow I was threatening their manhood. I don't know how, but yeah, I was beat for 11 hours, put into a cage along with 3 other queer people. So that's why I'm leading a campaign called MeToo Behind Bars, because we're trying to make these changes, and we kind of want folks to know what goes on the inside.
Tell us a little bit about that. So you, I mean, I'm sorry for, you know, your experience. First of all, I know it's awful. I don't know how to react to that. But you know, you experience this awful thing. How did MeToo Behind Bars start after that? Like, what actions did you take?
Well, there's a prison advocacy group called Central California. I'm sorry. I'm thinking CCWF, California Coalition for Women Prisoners. It's CCWP. I'm sorry, I was incarcerated in CCWF. That's why I said that. And I get a little funny around telling my story, so I'm sorry if I'm stuttering or I get like stuck a little.
But don't apologize. It's your story.
Okay. So I told my family for the first time on in prison, and I asked them to ask a friend of mine who was a prison advocate to ask for help. And after 14 years of being in prison, like, I never told my family what happened to us in there and what goes on a daily basis. Like, it's humiliating. You feel ashamed. You feel like it's your fault. But when I decided to let my family know and ask them to reach out to some prison advocates, I knew then that I was going to be a whistleblower, that I was going to expose the prison for what, like, they do and what goes on every day. Like, this isn't, and Jai, I promise you, this is not just like my story. This isn't like one incident that just happened to me. Like, it happens all the time. I have friends that have broken ribs, sternum, clavicle bones. I mean, that have been raped. Like, a lot of things have, this story, it's like, mine is out, but I'm trying to get theirs out too. So that's why I do this work, so that we can have folks advocating for them and people can start paying attention to what's going on in the women's prison. But
Rojas?
Yes.
I wanna. I know we had a flow of we had a conversation last week, and we had a flow. But I do want to highlight because I see something that happened a couple times during this chat. Is that we spoke last week after we got off the call with Jai about abuse, right, and accepting certain levels of abuse. And actually, while Jai was on the call, he said the term trauma, right? And I think that as an advocate, we hear that term so much that we start to feel like, damn, like it's overused. Like it's starting to become cliche to some degree, right? And we're like, should we use that term? But it absolutely is, right? And so we were speaking about my situation, right? We were speaking about your recent situation, and having choose a lesser abuse over another, right? And we talk about, like, if we're in a relationship or the media, right? We talk about classes in school. And if you're in a domestic violence situation, they say once you see one red flag, or if he does it once, he'll do it again, or those types of things that you hear. And then yet with the police, we're like, well, I'm not sure if that was abuse. Like, maybe should I call it abuse? He didn't break my rib. Like he didn't, you know what I mean? But then we have bruises, we have cuts. He was slamming us. Like there were certain things that happen, and we don't even know how to language it because we don't know what to call it, right? Because it wasn't death or it wasn't extreme. Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's why I kind of wanted to have today's conversation as well, is because what we see, the media picks up the murders, right? The cold-blooded killings, but this isn't new. And it's really about, it's the system. And it's not just about police. I mean, that is just one part of a very, very broken system. And I think what I'm so inspired by the both of you is because you're taking action. And I think a lot of people are kind of going, how can we take action? And your stories, I mean, I don't even know how to say it. But that's kind of what I want to dive into today. How as a society can we help, but how can we all take action? Because it's not just about the police. We're going to highlight that today because I know, Yahniie, I want to kind of get into your story around Christmas. But I mean, I think it's awful what happened. It's awful what's been happening, but this can be an opportunity for change. So how do we do that? Yahniie, do you want to, I'll give some context. So, Yahniie, like I mentioned, we brought Yahniie on after she graduated our program last year to run our partnerships. And within a few months, we realized how brilliant Yahniie was and invited her to become a partner in the company, and a co-founder. I was at my girlfriend's house in Virginia around Christmas time. I got a text message a couple of days before Christmas from Yahniie saying that she'd been arrested. And I was just like, what do you mean? And Yahniie, I'll let you go into it.
Yeah. So I'm currently at my best friend's house, and that'll have a place. But right now I'm at my best friend's house. She has a film festival, and that evening at that time, we were headed to a Christmas giveaway. It was a Saturday. I sound like a narrator, right? Saturday of December 21st. Right? We were headed to a toy drive with my daughter, and I had been drinking that night. I mean, in my home, and all of a sudden, it was about 15 minutes before we were supposed to leave, and we get a knock on the door. And they're like, it's LAPD. And I look through the peephole, and I'm like, okay, hey, open the door. And I was like, hey, what's going on? They were like, can we come in? And I was like, no. At the time, I'm in my bra and panties, and I was not dressed. And so I said no, because also they didn't tell me why they were there, like what was going on. It's LAPD. I opened the door. They proceeded to kick the door in after I said no, right? So they kicked the door in, and within 5 seconds of them being in my home, I was arrested. I do not know why they were here. I do not know. And what I do know is that law enforcement, especially LAPD, is notorious for killing Black people and getting away with it. Nobody knew they were at my home. Nobody knew the situation was happening to me. I was absolutely terrified. So I was absolutely hysterical, right? The first thing I do, I have a 9-year-old, she's right here, right? My 9-year-old was in the living room, and she watched them slam me against stuff. She watched them arrest me. She watched everything that happened. And the first thing that I did when they arrested me was tell her, record them. That's my reality, right? The first thing I did was tell her to record them. She began to record them. The second thing I did was like, okay, never mind, don't record them. Call Lamika, which is a family member of ours, right? So she called Lamika. When she called her, she said, you know, I'm scared that they're gonna hurt my mom, whatever. Lamika lives right 2 blocks away, pretty much. She ran down, her and her husband came. By then, it was already about 20 minutes after they had been there. And when, you know, they were asked if they had a warrant, when they were asked why I was outside naked, being, you know, drug against a wall, when they asked why I was being arrested, the officers just refused to answer those questions. And they, while they were asking those questions, Lamika and her husband, Daniel, while they were asking those questions, they were recording. Because Black Lives Matter has a policy that they record any arrest that happens as it's in progress, so people can have proof of what's going on. And so they came and recorded everything that happened. So after them being there and after them being questioned about why I was being arrested, they then said I was being arrested for being intoxicated in my home. They said that that is a felony charge, and it was child endangerment at that point. So they arrested me, took me away. They then took my child into custody, and they had her there for 11 hours. They told her, I just found out actually about 3 days ago, actually. She just told me that they told her that I ran. So these 2 officers that came in my home, they came and took me away. They came back and told my daughter that I ran away, right? So they had me at the police station. They told her that I ran away. They interrogated her for 11 hours without feeding her, threatened to give away her emotional support animal. And they would not tell my lawyer where I was. So they kept moving me or sending my lawyer to different places because they sent the lawyer out for me. So they kept sending him to different places. And there were people there petitioning for Naima to come home to family, and they refused to give Naima up. So in this situation, we have me. I've been doing advocacy for several years. I told the officers that they were gonna have to build a case. Like, you guys are gonna have to be really strategic about whatever you put in the report, and they absolutely were, right? So when we went to the court, there was
Can I stop you for a second, Yahniie? I just want to give some context a little bit about what you told me. But one, the intoxication thing, you'd had like 2 glasses of wine. You weren't actually intoxicated. You were just drinking a glass of wine at home, like a lot of mothers do. I mean, my mum drinks wine every single night for the last 60 years. And also why they were there. Are you going to get into why they were there, or do you want me to tell you?
So the issue was that they got a call about domestic violence, about there being a man yelling and a woman screaming. There's no man in my home, right? And so the issue, so I wanted to kind of dive, right? And so the issue was that they came to my home about a domestic violence call, right? And so in that moment, you say that there was and we don't know because they had several different stories about why they even came to my home in the first place. And they had to backpedal because there were so many people supporting me in this situation that they realized that they fucked up. That was really what the situation was. And so they had a call about domestic violence, and when they came in, they didn't ask if everything was okay. They just asked if they could come in. They were trying to pin a man in the house. And my issue that I took with it, I mean, I have several issues, of course, because I was affected by it. But my issue that I had with it is like, when you have a situation that, first of all, I've been in domestic violence situations, the role that they played in it would further traumatize a family, and it did further traumatize a family. It traumatized a family that was fine, was absolutely fine. And they created because I had told them, right? So as they were arresting me, so it wasn't because I was belligerent or anything like that. It was because I had told them that I'd been drinking and they saw the glass on my counter while they were arresting me. So they built the case after they came into my home. It wasn't that they had a case when they came into my home to arrest me, right? And so once they saw the support, they realized that they had to create it. They had to create a crime in order to justify why I was incarcerated, okay? And so that is part of what happens, right? And so you have Congress members, right? You have Creative Futures who was there in support, right? You have my peers, you have Lamika and Daniel, right? You have Black Lives Matter who was at the police station. I had all of this support, right? And I felt betrayed because I'd never been the type to say, I believed that there were good cops, right? I believed in that. I believed that, the system needed to be in place. I believed that until this thing happened to me, right? And so, excuse me, let me reframe that, until I experienced this thing, right? And so at this point, I wonder. And so as I move forward, my charge is to look at how many families have been torn apart, because I got my baby back because there was no case, thanks to Creative Futures. And I'm going to shout out Bill Silva. I know he's on the call right now, for supporting in that. And I'm so grateful. And there are so many different people who are in support of me in that time that helped me walk through that process. But how many families, first of all, my mom was ripped away. I mean, I was ripped away and placed in foster care for something similar. And there are a lot of families who don't have Congress members and don't have Creative Futures, who don't have these things way more than me, right? And so their kids are in foster care. They're incarcerated. They're fighting a charge that they should not be even fighting in the first place. And you have these officers laughing. It's a joke to them, right? It's a joke. And so I just wanted to move forward. So when we talk about defunding the police, that's part of the conversation. Or when we talk about defunding the police, it's not saying that we just want to, we're radical in the sense that we just want to terminate the police. It's saying that the premise and the system that they were built on was to attack and enslave Black people, and they have continued to murder Black people. And we want to acknowledge that and be honest and have that real conversation, and make sure it has been proven that when public safety is placed in the hands of the community, when it's community-based, when you are putting money in the community for trained people who handle public safety, it is more effective than policing, because policing only feeds the mass incarceration system. That is what we're doing. So I would have ended up, as you guys know me, right? You guys met me, some of you have met me, and I would have ended up in that same exact system that we're trying to go against, right? And so that is the problem with what we're facing here.
And, I mean, I want to go because Marky and I went to the children's court case.
Okay.
I've never been more embarrassed by a system and what was happening to you and your daughter, Naima. Hey, Naima. It was heartbreaking. It was, I can honestly say that what happened to you and Naima, that would not happen. That never happened to any of my white friends. Ever. That not just that fact that they kicked down your door, threw you against a wall, decided to put some charges in. They put 2 charges against you, which is the bullshit, pardon me swearing, criminal case, which was the intoxication. But they went a step further and tried to separate you and your daughter. Do you want to talk about that? I mean, that to me is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Personally, sorry. I'm not even going to apologize. It is what it is. I'm emotional because I'm very much impacted by that. It was a very traumatizing situation. I thought I was going to lose my life. My life was uprooted by that. My daughter's life, my daughter was impacted deeply by that. We are still currently going through it. I still have 2 drug tests, right? Because the report that the officers wrote said that I was abusing substances, right? And so this is the reality of what how I impacted. Personally, I've done everything in my power to. I'm a single parent. I've been a single parent. I was a teen parent. I've done everything in my power to create a network. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're cutting out, sort of.
You guys can hear me.
Internet connection looks bad.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can now.
Yeah.
Yeah, are you close to
No.
the router?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I think it's
Your video stalled.
my phone. Am I cutting out still?
Yeah. Okay. You. Hey, Stacy.
Hey, Jai.
I mean, you know, hearing Yahnie's story, you mentioned that people, family members of yours, community. I mean, what does that do to a family? What does that do to a community?
Um, it's, I mean, I come from a family where we didn't have like therapy, and I'm like, we didn't have that growing up. Like none of my cousins, I didn't know any black or brown people that did. So we went through that, being angry at each other, blaming each other for what happened to my cousin. And like when my uncle got shot, he ran through the yard, and my grandpa was like, "Go, go," because he didn't want any of us getting shot. It's like something you had to deal with, and like my own situation. Just oh, Yanni's back. I'm going, Yahniie.
Thank you. I'm sorry, y'all. I think it's my computer that acts really jacky with it. With
We, we were
the
just
web.
talking to I just threw it over to Rojas on how this impacts families.
Oh yes. So for one, I think I just come from a background where there was not a lot of structure, and I think at the point in my family, we had reached a point. So I'm a single parent. I think I mentioned that earlier. I'm not sure if you all heard. I'm a single parent. I was a teen parent. I had my baby while I was still in foster care, with the threat of them taking her away simply because I was a foster youth. So I've done everything in my power, knowing that the odds were stacked against me as a young Black woman. I tried my best to provide Naima with a stable foundation, of supportive mentors of mine and her own community that she can contact if she ever felt unsafe or things like that. So I've done my best to create a safety net for us as a unit, and a support network for her. And what happened to us, what we experienced in December, especially like everything that was done was in retaliation, because they felt, I'm not sure exactly what they felt, but they wanted me to call them ma'am and sir. But I'm just like, you just walked in my home and arrested me. So I'm not sure. So it was really more about respectability politics and me, them feeling like I should respect them when they never showed any respect to me, and I wasn't disrespectful to them at all. Right. And so how this impacts our family is that, I have to take off of work. So I'm losing wages in order to go drug test. Right. And so I have to make sure that, I complete all of these hoops and hurdles, therapy, all of these things that we didn't need until they came into it. And I'm not saying that at the time we were not, I still have a therapist. I've had a therapist for years, right? But now my daughter needs extra support because of what happened, what occurred with the police, right? And they refuse to acknowledge, and the social worker as well. They refuse to acknowledge the role that they played in that. And oftentimes what happens is, first of all, I just want to acknowledge that I'm very lucky because my daughter went into foster care, but she was with family and she was absolutely safe. And although the social workers and police advised against me being able to have contact with my child over this case that they created, right? To heal, right? And so I want to be mindful that my situation is an anomaly when it comes to these situations. We have thousands of parents and kids in the system and ripped apart from their families, especially Black kids. You're talking about what 9.8% of the population, but make up 24% of foster care, right? A lot of these families don't need to be, and a lot of these are Black people, right? So we're talking about our communities being heavily policed and a lot of these families being ripped apart, and they have to go through 10 things, like 10 different programs of 6-month-long programs and drug tests every week and therapy for the child and the parent. And then there's like 2 social workers. They visit once a week, and then another one who visits twice a month. And depending on what the situation, parenting classes, all of these things, all of these hurdles just to keep a child that should have never been taken in the first place. And it's not individual. It's not centered on an individual. We've been working on this for years. A lot of families are in the system right now fighting for their kids, especially during this COVID thing, especially during the pandemic, and especially during all of these times right now during the uprisings and everything where these offices are not even open. So.
Yeah. And how, you mentioned that, did you say your mother was foster care?
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you went into the system as well. So, I mean, how do you stop that cycle?
So I've been doing my best to stop it. It's hard because the system that is in place doesn't provide real ways for us to really address the issue. And these systems, DCFS, the criminal justice system, the juvenile justice system, the mental health system needs a reform throughout. But all of the systems that essentially detain children and detain people, immigration, a lot of the people who are in that system don't need to be in the system. So they're criminalizing things that they should not be criminalizing, right? You get in a fight in high school, for somebody in the suburbs, it looks different than a kid who gets incarcerated or it gets in a fight in a Black or brown community. It just looks different. There's no probation, there's no school on campus, all of the things, even the police in the community, they're stopping kids for no reason. So what I thought I was doing to help change the system was fighting and advocating for laws to be changed, right? And so we win some, we lose some. Sometimes the laws don't get changed that we want to get changed. But how we break this system down is by, first of all, acknowledging the fact that they are over policing certain communities. We have to be culturally competent. I can't go into a Latino family and expect to know exactly how they parent their children and what their process is. I can't see someone curse and or drink and then say, oh, well, they're not fit to raise their children. That's not true. It's not the issue with parenting. It's that they're policing people. They're policing culture. They're policing those things, right? And so we have to be mindful of that. And the way that we break it is by acknowledging that, defunding a lot of these organizations, and defunding does not mean getting rid of it totally and that kids are not going to be safe. What that means is placing the funding into programs and supports that will really truly uplift and empower the family, not a program that is designed to tear apart and keep apart the family because it's funding them.
Yeah, absolutely. Rojas, I want to throw it to you for a second. What support would you need, or what support do you know in your community, growing up, this Compton, Hispanic background community? What support could could your community do with?
Like support in schools, I think we need like tutoring for, first of all, like we're way behind in Compton. Like, they ain't reading the stuff kids are reading in Glendale or something, like we're way behind. So like tutoring, if we're talking about like in school, like what kind of after school programs I think are important, the same that kids get. I mean, you can go to Compton schools after school, you just see fighting. I mean, you see like police there at the school watching these kids get out of school, like they're being policed. In Compton, cops can walk around with AR-15s. Like you can look it up. Like they're allowed to walk around with AR-15s in the Compton school district.
Can I
think one of the only school districts in the country.
To the education piece on that though? Yeah. I was talking to you, and I'm from Compton as well, right? And so my mom, she sent me to Long Beach schools, right? And I was fighting. I was like, and when I say fighting, I was like arguing and debating and negotiating with, really it's not arguing, it was debating and negotiating with my mom. I really wanted to go to a Compton school because my family's from Compton. My dad went to Compton High. Those are the things that I wanted, right? I wanted to follow tradition. My mom was like, no, because these schools are not accredited. They're really behind. They got old books, whatever. So she sent me to Long Beach, right? Like the suburb of Long Beach to go to school. And so, of course, after being incarcerated, I got kicked out of the school in Long Beach for a fight. And then came back home to Compton and went to a school. It was a community school. And I was in 10th grade and they were giving me 8th grade work, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm hella bored, right? I'm hella bored because I'm like, this is not even, I'm in high school. I'm supposed to be on the next level and this is the what was provided, and talking to the principal did not provide any solutions, right? They were just like, this is what it is. Here's your 8th grade packet, finish it. And I finished it in an hour, right? And so education is super important when you're looking at the disparity between, or the differences between our communities and other communities in the suburbs, because they're getting the resources first. So I did want to acknowledge that as lived experience.
Yeah. And what about, I mean, what about employment?
Huge.
You know,
We need the jobs. I mean, there are jobs in Compton, but it isn't the people from the community that are working in these jobs. Like, people drive from other cities. I mean, you go down Alameda, it's all industrial, you know, like there's so many, there's a lot of work, but I don't know anyone that's working at those places. Like, we don't get those jobs. So everyone I know is warehouse work, you know.
Yeah. And I mean,
Leaving Compton
outside of Compton.
Yeah.
I mean, I want, you know, that's what we do at Creative Futures, right? The whole idea is like, how can we help people get careers that they haven't traditionally had access to? Talk about, I mean, Stacy, you're doing really, really well with the work that you're doing, but I mean, how important, not just for you personally, but also, and Yahniie, this is you, but not just you personally, but also, again, friends, family, and community members. How important is the difference between just having a job, say like working at McDonald's or like, you know, some kind of like frontline job, versus having a career, having purpose? Like, about the difference and what you've seen people that have, you know, one versus the other.
Are you gonna?
Now,
Well, I mean, first of all, now I'm getting paid a livable wage, and I didn't have that before, and I wouldn't have had that at McDonald's. I mean, damn, McDonald's wouldn't even hire me, y'all, so I'm very lucky. I can help my family out now. It feels better, like, talking about it, because people expect me to work at McDonald's, you know? People look at me and they don't think that I'm in the position that I'm in, and that I'm working with youth, and that I'm an advocate for prison after I left that place. Like, people just, I'm judged a lot. So it is a big deal for me being the lead organizer at the Young Women's Freedom Center. It does something from like my confidence, like my self-esteem, you know, to just not be what everybody looks at me and already expects, that I don't have a job or that I'm working at a fast food place. So my little nieces now like want to come work with me, and that's something I thought would never go down, you know, like people in my family wanted to come check out what I do. That's, you know, it feels good.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I talk about that a lot. I mean, we talk about that a lot, especially with companies, when we say, you know, you give someone, let's just say like internships or entry level jobs at, let's just say like a record label. Like, you give some kid that grew up in Brentwood and USC an opportunity to come into that, you know, some affluent white kid comes in and does that, you know, they're like, yeah, I expect this, right? I expect that this should be given to me. It doesn't really impact anyone past that. And what I've kind of seen is, Stacy, you were just mentioning, but like, when you give someone an opportunity that hasn't traditionally had opportunity given to them, how that has a flow-on effect. It doesn't just impact you, it's impacting, like you said, your nieces, your family, your community. Yahniie, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I was over here cheering Rojas on right now, because I'm like, I know that feeling to be from the inner city, to not have access. And one of my favorite words is access to the resources. Access to the resources, and then your family sees you as the person, right? So you met my mom, Jai, at court, right? That's my mom's first time really experiencing the social justice community in its realness, being present at court with me, so deep that the lawyers were like, we've never seen anything like this, so much support for a parent, right? And so with these companies that are hiring, that choose to, what I notice is, yes, it boosts, like they said, it boosts the confidence of the individual, right? But the ideas that you get, and I know a lot of people just have this idea and these stigmas associated with certain people from certain backgrounds. If they don't speak or act a certain way, or don't look a certain way, don't dress a certain way, sometimes we tend to devalue those folks. But we don't realize is the diversity that comes with that, the market. So my market on the east side of Compton is now going to come to and start doing social justice work when they're usually just used to being in their bubble, right? And now it's going to be exposed to travel and exposed to different performances and different music and different trades, right? Versus what Rojas identified as what industrial, the communities, the large franchises that work in the city, having a city or county job, maybe those things. So we're diversifying what options are out there for folks, and they are able to give back in a way. So one of the things that is unique about Creative Futures is that in order to apply, you have to be committed to giving back on some level. So you have to be attached to some type of social justice movement on your own. We have to see that because we want to know that you're committed to the work, the ground level work, and it takes a lot. And so there's so many different things that need to be shifted. There's so many conversations that need to be had. And so we're able to have those conversations by making sure that we're tapping into people who are on the ground doing some of the work, right? And so that is one thing. When you hire and employ somebody with a livable wage through Creative Futures, you are essentially giving back inadvertently through that person. And that person usually is very inspired and inspiring other people to do the same. So the ripple effect that has is tremendous, and a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, I know. We use a statistic that, it costs the taxpayer about $20,000 a year for people living, at or below the poverty line, which, as you know, is, I want to say, a majority of the people that come through our program, right? We've been very fortunate. 70% of the people that come through now have full-time jobs, which is amazing. But that's, that in itself is putting $30,000 back into the community, and you talk about, I mean, it comes down to policy, I guess, as well, because where's the government going to put that money that's no longer being spent on, affordable housing or food stamps, etc. But, you talk about we've defunded the police and, reallocating budgets and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, it is really important. It's like, where is that money going to go? But I mean, just the statistic alone, like if a company came today and hired someone from our program, every single year, there's a minimum of $30,000 because $10,000 in taxes if they're making $50,000 a year salary. Every year going back into the community, going back into school. So it has such a bigger impact than, again, just the individual. I want to go to Black Lives Matter. I know, it's a topic right now. We're seeing a lot of companies come out and make pledges and statements and donations. We're seeing a lot of money being pledged. But and I'm very opinionated on this, but I'm going to throw it to you. But it's all good and well to say something. What can people do? What can an individual do? What can an organization do? A company,
So Rojas, I feel like we had a piece of the flow that we didn't acknowledge today, which was part of our natural organic conversation that we have often, about like people's roles as allies, right? And I think they brought up a very valuable point, but I do, because I have held a lot of this conversation and I know that they are providing a space for me as a Black woman, and I appreciate that. But I do want to toss it to Rojas really quick, and let them weigh in on it really quick, and then try to address like what their thoughts are really quick, and I'll talk about it.
Yeah. You already know, Yahniie, I had asked Yahniie, how could I like step up and step to the side and really listen to what Yahniie has to say and see how I can support as being a brown person and not a Black person at this time. Like I was asking Yahniie, like, what would that, how could I support best? I think that's the question everyone should be asking themselves, And as for these companies that are asking how they can support, start hiring Black folks. Like don't just donate. I look around. Do you see any Black people around you at these companies that you own? That's pay them the way you're paying the white folks. That's just, sorry, Yahniie, I didn't know if you wanted to get all into that.
Absolutely. I mean, we didn't go that deep. We just.
I know. I had to say that though. I'm like,
Yeah. I appreciate you. Love you. And I agree, right? And I will go even as far as to say, like, I think when I think about the government and politics, I'm just like, I really want the government and like in the White House for it to reflect what this country looks like, right? And I want companies to reflect the people that they serve or just the community that they're in. And so I think we see a lot of these posts, and I call bullshit every time. Excuse my language, but no, not excuse my language. It is what it is, right? And so I see it and I'm just like, okay, but what have you done, right? And that's the conversation of like, we've been hearing, and you got to remember, as a Black person, as a brown person, we've been this ain't nothing new to us, right? This is not new at all, right? And so we've been having the conversations, we've been bringing the conversation to the table, we've been labeled crazy or angry or ungrateful for having these same conversations. And so now we're at the point where it's like, okay, you're in support. We're glad that you're in support. We wish you would have been in support earlier. However, like, what are the actionable steps that we're going to take to make sure that we're diversifying our jobs, right? Our companies, I would go even as far to say personal lives. What do our personal lives look like, right? What do our friendships look like? How do we really perceive people who do not look like us? And that is something that I charge myself with consistently. Concepts that I don't understand. I think many of you may have heard that I've been challenging myself today on this call with GNC language, right? Like GNC non-conforming pronouns, right? And so that's something that I am learning, and you guys are witnessing me learning and making sure that I honor Rojas in the way that they need to be honored, right? And so it's not something that we're going to be perfect at. It's not something that we're always going to have the answers to, but I think maybe having the questions always is super important. And just learning and being open and not saying that this doesn't exist. It exists. And now we're seeing, you know, we've been on quarantine, so a lot of people had a lot more time to watch the video, but videos have been present, right? Videos have been online. Trayvon Martin's killing was online. Philando Castro's killing was online, right? Sandra Bland's arrest was online. These things were present, right? We've been hurting. It's been a thing. So, you know, and it's still currently happening, right? When this movement started, right, when the reckoning began, we were at 601 murders in LA County. We're now at 609, and no officer has been arrested in Los Angeles. So the conversation is, yes, the policy change on the politician side, but we have to look at the systems, education system, housing system, employment. Like, what are the ways that how do we really perceive people? What are our stigmas? Why do we feel like certain people don't qualify for these positions? What are the ways that we are placing barriers in our own lives and companies, and how that manifests itself?
I mean, it's okay. Company pledges $1 million to say Black Lives Matter, right?
But
versus,
with white leadership, that doesn't, to me, make a, like.
Okay, what do you think is more impactful? A company pledging $1 million to Black Lives Matter, or a company pledging to employ, support, and invest in 1,000 people of color from South Los Angeles?
I personally think that you can do both, right? I think that because that there are a lot of companies that have not, you know, met up or have not came to this place, and people that need to be informed. I think that supporting an organization that is that is important because they also need funding, but also making sure that you internally, like, yes, I can donate all the money I want, but if my home and my personal kitchen table conversations are not up to par, I think that it doesn't really, like, what difference does it make, right? And I have so I'm split in the middle. I think that there's a way, like, say you have $1 million, maybe 500,000 could go this way and 500,000 could go the other way.
Yep. I've got a question here for you, Yahniie. And Tony also just said, having people of color within a company to help bring change and hire people of color and having people of color in HR would help end discrimination, which is very on point and good to see you in here, Tony. Yahniie, just a question, because I guess we didn't kind of finish your case. Do you want to kind of explain what happened just quickly, and then I kind of want to go into just kind of next steps. But the question is, how long did it take for your case to be finished? I believe it's still going.
Yeah. So it's so tricky. So first of all, like Jai mentioned, there were 2 cases. I have 4 fingers up. 2 cases. One of the cases was criminal, which was a child endangerment case. And then on the other side, because that's a child endangerment is a penal code, and in the children's court, there's a child welfare code, I believe it is. So I had 2 charges there, which were substance abuse and child neglect, right? And so the neglect charge came simply because I was arrested, by the way. And so that was I was supposed to have a closed court case, which means I wouldn't have to go to see a judge anymore. I would just have to agree to 6 months of programming, which is all the things that I talked to you guys about, all the therapy and all the things for 6 months, and then the case would be closed. However, that court date never happened. And they pushed it back to November, but about an hour before this call, a social worker called me and said that they've pushed it up to June 29th, which they have not made a decision. They're still in consideration. No matter the support, everybody wrote letters, everybody showed that my daughter even told them that there was no substance abuse problem. Even the day that they arrested me, they created the problem. And now I just have to deal with whatever the system says I have to deal with in order for my daughter not to go in the system. So essentially, if things go well in 2 weeks and they grant, well for me is ending the case. But best case scenario in this case, considering the way that the system is set up, best case scenario is that, no, we're gonna say best case scenario is ending the case. But their best case scenario is me still having a case, and them closing the court case, but me still agreeing to 6 months of services. So that's what's happening with that. So we'll see. Because of COVID, they pushed my court back to November, my court date back to November, but we'll see what happens on June 29th.
Yeah. And I think the victory here is that Naima is still with you. And
she's been with me. They took her away for 6 days. There was really no threat, honestly. They returned her immediately. It was just having to get in court. And because they served me on Christmas Day with the same arresting officers who slammed me up. And by the way, when I was arrested, after I was arrested, my hands were numb and I have cuts on me from the handcuffs. Every time I asked them and I told them that, my cuffs were too tight, which is a typical way that they use to abuse people. Every time I told them that my cuffs are too tight, they would squeeze them even more. And so I literally had a cuts on my hand, and my hands were swollen, and there were lines from the handcuffs. And for a month, I couldn't feel the top of my hands.
Jesus. I'm sorry that happened on Christmas. But I'm glad Naima's home. I mean, she doesn't belong anywhere else but with you.
No.
And I think I cried, sadness and happiness that you got her back. So, I mean, and then the other thing is, and Bill Silva, I believe he's on, he was a huge help. And you mentioned this before, but people having resources. I mean, you know what's going on, and you are an activist, and you know what's happening, so you know what resources you have, and you have a network, and how important that was. I mean, when you told me what was going on, I reached out to Bill straight away. So Bill Silva, for anyone who doesn't know, he's a great friend and supporter of Creative Futures, and he's been a friend of mine for a long time, and he's just a wonderful, beautiful person. Mm-hmm. And I just sent him a text, said, "Hey, this has happened to Yahniie. Do you know any criminal defense lawyers?" And he's like, "Yep." And he put us in touch with one, and I introduced you guys.
And he was a kick-ass one. He couldn't wait. He was really on my side. He said, "Okay, tell me what happened." Told him what happened. He was like, "Oh, I can't wait to cross-examine these officers." And it was like, yeah, because they're lying, So it was really helpful to have that support. Just I'm human. I might be a strong advocate. I might know the laws. I might know these things. I might, have this strong face, but I was breaking down. I was arrested and incarcerated for 2 days for no reason, right? And they took my daughter in that time, and the things that they put me through were illegal technically, right? They took my daughter without a court order, and they kept dangling her over me. Then they brought the same officer who essentially abused me, not even essentially, who abused me, back to my home on Christmas Day to tell me they were taking my child, right? That was the goal. And so that was very hard to deal with. And I had a lot of support, but a lot of families, you got to remember, some of them like cannot even recover from that. And because I have the support system and because I've been through a lot already, I believe that I was able to recover a little bit faster, and I still deal with things. So I still leave. When I leave today and go to the grocery store, I still have 2 phones in the car, and I still have to take a different set of precautions to make sure that there's a recording phone and that there's a phone that people know that I got pulled over, and things like that, because we never know what could happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Stacy, Rojas, you've been through a lot. You've experienced some traumatic events yourself.
Even
Obviously,
recently.
Yeah, Joe, I was gonna tell you, like, I'm a lot more nervous today than, like, I was getting kind of after Creative Futures, I got more comfortable with speaking in front of people, and recently I was stopped, like punched by a cop when I was pulled over. He kidney shot me, and I told Yahniie about this, and it made my knees buckle, and they left after that, and I was actually happy that they left, and I didn't get more than that. So it's like they re-traumatized me. Now, when I was getting a lot more comfortable even driving when they were behind me, like now I'm shaking again, and now I'm like I'm thinking of these situations, and I'm starting to stutter again, or like get stuck, and it's like yeah, earlier when you asked what it does to families, that's what it does. It traumatizes them, and then we pass it down to the children. But it's just every time an incident like this happens, it's re-traumatizing us. It brings everything back that we worked so hard,
To recover from, right?
Yeah.
I want to speak to that just really quick. I know we are about to wrap up and things like that. My daughter came up as, I started doing advocacy work when she was about 6 months, 6 months old. I was going to say 6 years old, 6 months old. And so she's come with me to every meeting. Everybody knows her because I was a teen parent and I'm a single parent, and she's always with me. Right.
is she there right now?
Huh?
Behind you?
Yeah.
Did you get her to introduce herself?
She's Naima. You want to come say hi? He's like, sure. And you can tell me if I'm not telling the truth. You can tell the people. I just want to make sure that I'm speaking for you properly if I'm going to speak for you, okay? And so, Naima's relationship with the police was not skewed. Naima's relationship, it had not been skewed in any way. But at 9 years old, she witnessed people law enforcement come into her home, and abuse her mother, and then take her away from her home, tell her that she cannot go back to her home for a matter of a week or however long. But to us, we didn't know how long that was going to last. So every day was hard because it shouldn't have happened in the first place. Let's just be clear about that, because it seems like a small amount of time, but for every day, you can't have any contact with your mom, who she's been with every single day of her life, for the most part. And so you have this now where my daughter now does not trust police. Let me just be clear that 2 weeks ago, I was pulled over by police and my daughter started crying. She went through the entire process again just because we got pulled over, right? Just because we got pulled over. She walked through going through a foster home. She relived the exact experience. And so her experience, and she cried in court. Jai was there, right? She cried in court, and her crying, the judge attacked me, right? And people saw them attacking me. But right. And so the reality for my daughter was that she was crying because law enforcement had lied, right? And they lied, and there was no way for her to articulate herself. And what she witnessed in law enforcement was that they were not being in integrity like they said they would be. They did not protect and serve her, right? And so having experienced that, for me, I'm just like, damn, that's her experience as a child, right? She's gonna grow up and have that have this perspective of law enforcement, but that is what it is. And so I'm not going to try to shift that as much as I would want to and want her to feel safer in this world. There are certain realities that we have to face and that I have to inform her about in order. And that's that's another way that it impacts families.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Yahniie. Rojas, how can we support you? How can people on this call help the work that you're doing?
They can actually Jai actually have like a MeToo Behind Bars fact sheet that I would be able to email folks if they sent me an email and were interested in supporting at all at rojas@youngwomenfree.org.
Yep, I'll send it. If you want to send that to me, I can send it to everyone.
I sure will.
And how else? How can we support your community?
Doing the work that you do, Jai. I mean, that does support my community. People are starting to ask me about Creative Futures and are stoked about it. You know, Yahniie, you know, I've reached out. Hey, a friend of mine, they were trying to get in. So I think what you're doing already is helping our community.
Yep. Thank you.
Please keep it up, man. Yeah, thanks for thinking of our folks.
Yahniie, same question. How can we support the movement? How can the people on this call support?
I just think having those conversations, I think we're already having these conversations with our families, hopefully. Some of them are going to be very difficult, very uncomfortable, and understand that this is new. This is new to you, but it's old for us. And we're in support of you and whatever you need and tools that you need to have, but also in your professional lives, looking at what shifts can happen, even in small shifts. Just have a plan, right? It can't just be this stark difference, but have a plan for how you want to, like, not only just feel the things, but what does it look like? How do we view people? How can we diversify not only by race, right, by experiences? So that is one thing that we as Creative Futures do. We make sure that people's experiences paired with several different things create the diversity, as opposed to just focusing on how someone, what they show up as far as race is concerned.
Yeah, and I just want to, I'm gonna wrap it up because we've gone over, but I want to thank the both of you for sharing, you know, your challenging stories, and I'm sorry that you know that you've gone through it, but you're both amazing and resilient and creative, and you're going to change the world, you know, and that's what we're here to do. And I just want to mention how Creative Futures, you know, can help. I mean, people ask, like, what can we do? And I'll say it, and I'll say it loud. If you are an individual, you have access to resources, you have access to a network. Open doors for people. Open doors for Rojas. Open doors for Yahniie. Open doors for communities. If the company you work at doesn't have, you know, an internship policy or a hiring policy that is bringing diverse voices into the workforce, challenge your company. Tell them to step up. Tell them to stop posting on social media about whatever's, you know, the cool thing to do.
You hear that?
Tell them donate, but make the donation the base. That's the foundation. They should be doing that. But no, challenge your HR department. Talk to your CEO. And if you are in a position of power at a company, hire people. Talk to us. We have amazing talent waiting for opportunity. So, you know, it's easy. And when you bring in someone, like if you we brought Yahniie in because Yahnie's incredible, and the perspective and the insights and the lived experience Yahniie has gives us an edge. Like we have an edge as an organization because of Yahniie. And the work that Rojas does, it's the same thing. I mean, this isn't, the way I look at it, it's not like, oh, we're lending a hand, we're helping out. It's like, no, you're helping us, you know? Mm-hmm. So anyway, I got to wrap up. Thank you to the both of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Jai. Thank you, Yahniie.
Talk to y'all soon. Bye.
Yeah.
Yes.